Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Remoaner-in-chief or brave champion of the anti-Brexit resistance? The Liberal Democrat leader, Tim Farron, is with me. Before we come on to Brexit, Tim Farron, let me ask you about the Theresa May visit, because she had a very, very tough line to walk. She and we need a deal with this man. We have to, for the future prosperity of our communities and our children, have a good deal with America. And yet we are all, Liberal Democrats, the opposition, everybody is saying to her, you must be more forthright, must be more outspoken, in a sense, more insulting to the man you're asking for a deal. It's a very, very hard job she had to play.
It's not insulting to stand up to somebody who is behaving in a way which is appalling, arguing for the introduction of torture, being misogynistic, and this appalling ban on people entering the United States from Muslim countries. We would have expected her to go over to the United States to stand up to Donald Trump. She ended up holding his hand. And it seems to me that what we have at the moment is a weak position. Donald Trump himself wrote in The Art of the Deal 30 years ago that the best time for you to make a deal is when the other guy is desperate.
So you think
and she looked
he
desperate.
sniffs weakness here, is what you're saying?
For certain. Now, it seems to me it's quite right for the Prime Minister of Britain to talk to the United States President. If you only talk to people who share your values on the international stage, you will be very, very lonely. Of course, it's right to go and talk to him. What it was wrong to do is to go over there and effectively roll over in the face of the appalling actions, in particular the ban on people entering Muslim countries, from Muslim countries.
If I could just put this gently, we don't know what she said to him privately. And again, in this circumstance where we are asking him for a generous trade deal, to grandstand against him seems to be a dangerous thing for us, for her to do.
We do know that it took until the early hours this morning and the second or third redraft of a statement, it took until then for Theresa May to stand up and even say that she gently disagreed with what Donald Trump was doing. She should have opposed this from the beginning, but once it became apparent that this was going to be something that would affect British people, and Nadeem Zahawi we saw earlier on, Mo Farah, the guy who drove me here this morning, is an Iranian UK dual national. This affects British people, and you would expect the British Prime Minister to fight Britain's corner. Well, I want us to fight Britain's corner. To be very, very clear, I want Theresa May to be what a good friend to America would be, and tell them how it is. Don't go over there and just be supine and hold his hand.
She wasn't supine in the sense she got things out of him on NATO and so forth that many people thought she would not get. When, assuming this ban is still in place, it's a temporary ban, it's being challenged in the courts at the moment, so we don't quite know what's going to happen. But if it's still in place in the summer, when President Trump comes to this country for a state visit, do you want to see him addressing the House of Commons?
Well, I mean, it's important that you have people leading other countries engaging with us. I thought the offer of a state visit was hasty, particularly given the things he's been coming out with recently. My view is that, of course, you should engage with people like this, but there's a massive difference between engaging with Donald Trump and effectively giving succour to the kind of things that he's coming out with. He is undermining that kind of consensus, that sort of moderate internationalist, peaceful, tolerant consensus of the Western world over the last 70 years that Britain, America and Europe have been the pillars of, and we should not give in so lightly, because Theresa May has put herself in a desperate position because she sought a hard Brexit. She's in a position where she's alienating our friends to the east, and she's in a desperate position, and of course Donald Trump can smell desperation 3,000 miles away.
So let's turn to Brexit. It's pretty clear that you want us to stay inside the EU, is that fair?
Well, it's never been anything other than a liberal commitment.
And you would like us somehow to stop Brexit happening?
My view is that we're never going to get a better deal than the one we currently have in the European Union. That doesn't mean that I don't respect the result last June. The reality is that that referendum took place, so the government has a mandate to negotiate Brexit with the European Union. What Theresa May does not have is the mandate to make the choice that she just has, which is to go for a hard Brexit outside the single market, I'd argue that what she's done is she's assumed that the 52% meant what Nigel Farage means. I think that's a massive insult to the majority of people who voted to leave.
I'm sorry to stop you on that, but again and again and again, in that chair, that very chair, there was Boris Johnson, Michael Gove, David Cameron, George Osborne, and I asked every single one of them, does coming out of the EU mean coming out of the single market? And every one of them said yes. So I take it that people understood that we were leaving the single market because it is so intertwined with the rest of the EU that being in one really means being in the other.
But, I mean, you and I have both been sat on the sofa there with Nigel Farage, who's also argued for Britain being like Norway and like Switzerland. What are they? They are countries outside the EU and inside the single market. And if you really were arguing Britain's corner in Europe, then Theresa May would go in arguing for Britain to be in the single market. She's waved the white flag. That's why she's in a weak position with Donald Trump, because he can see that we are desperate.
So is your preferred option from where we are now, after the referendum, to somehow stay inside the EU, or is it to be outside the EU but inside the single market?
Put simply, the British people have the right to have the final decision on all this. Theresa May will return from Europe with a deal. We don't know what it's going to look like. She doesn't really know what it's going to look like. And somebody will decide on that deal. Will it be Theresa May? Will it be Parliament? Or will it be the British people? We think the British people should decide on the terms of the deal. And, of course, in that referendum on the terms of the deal, the other option will be for the British people to say, well, thanks very much, but no thanks, we'll stay put.
The problem is, of course, with that second referendum, is that apart from the Liberal Democrats, nobody else is calling for it. And so the chances of it actually happening are vanishingly small.
Well, you make the very strong case for the Liberal Democrats growing in size.
That wasn't my intention.
Well, there you are, you did it anyway. My sense is that our job is to scrutinise this process, to say, look, someone is going to decide on this deal. Somebody is, Theresa May, her government, Parliament, or the people. Or we say it should be the people, and democratically and logically, of course, it should be the people. We also say that it's unlikely, we may be wrong, but it's unlikely that we'll ever do a deal with Europe that is as good as the one we have now. And we're not ashamed of saying that that is the case. It might be brave for us to stand up for this position, but somebody needs to. And what we're doing is offering people a vehicle for this not to be over and done with, for the British people to still remain paramount in this, for their will to be expressed at the end of this process, not just at the beginning.
Given that there is a very important issue now about to be discussed in the House of Commons as part of the Article 50 triggering debate, which is when the final vote on the deal can take place in the House of Commons. Now, as I understand it, the government is saying at the end of the process, when we have got our agreement, we come back to the House of Commons and you either accept our agreement or we leave on WTO rules, and that's it. The Labour Party and many others, I think in your party, want to see a vote before the end of the deal. So what are the chances of parliamentary votes, parliamentary confrontations, if you like, during the two-year process before it's over?
Well, of course, Parliament should be holding government to account throughout all of this. We want the best deal possible, which is why Theresa May giving up on membership of the single market at the beginning is so foolish. It puts her in a position where she's got no serious negotiating position to start off with. Yes, of course, over the two-year period, we should be holding the government to account. But in the end, the big issue is what kind of deal will she come back with? This will dictate the kind of country we are, the kind of relationship we have with the rest of the world, how prosperous we are for perhaps the next half a century. And somebody will decide on that deal at the end. Should it be Theresa May on her own? Should it be her government? Should it be Parliament? Or should it be the British people? And the only logical and democratic end is for the British people to have the say at the end.
You say, in a sense, that you're speaking for the 48% who voted to stay.
I think we're speaking for many people in the 52% who don't believe they voted for the extreme version of Brexit that Theresa May has chosen.
Can I put it to you that you'd be speaking more effectively for them with your small number of MPs, your 9 MPs, if you were actually reaching out to other parties who took the same view, if you were reaching out to the SNP, if you were reaching out to the Labour Party, but you won't because in the end you're all still tribal?
Well, it's a danger in British politics that it does make you live within silos. One of the advantages of the referendum, it was great spending time with people like Caroline Lucas, with Sarah Wollaston, with Harriet Hartman, campaigning on an issue we had in common and finding out there was much more we had in common also. But the reality is that I think the two great threats Britain faces at the moment, one is hard Brexit, the other is a Tory government for the next 25 years. And it seems to me that the Liberal Democrats need to grow to provide that decent, moderate, progressive alternative
to hear you saying
to the Tories.
Can I ask you, almost in one word, very, very quickly, with Article 50 coming to the House of Commons next week, is there any chance that Theresa May can be defeated on any of those amendments?
Well, only if all parties, and that means many Conservatives, vote in the interests of their constituents and vote for there to be democracy at the end of the process, as well as at the beginning.
Tim Farron, for now, thanks a lot for talking to us.
Well, with me now in the studio is the leader of the Lib Democrats, Tim Farron. Thanks very much for being with us this morning.
Morning, Sophie.
Now, you and your party want a second referendum on any Brexit deal. So is this how democracy works then? If you don't like the result the first time round, you just keep voting until you get it right?
Well, in one sense, of course, democracy does most definitely mean that you keep going. If you lose, you keep fighting what you believe in. But I'm going to be really pedantic and pull you up. It's not a second referendum. The referendum that we had in June gives the government a mandate to go and negotiate departure from the European Union. What I'd argue is that at the end, a deal will be arrived at by Theresa May, and it's simply a question as to who signs it off. Who gives the final stamp of approval? Is it Theresa May herself? Is it the government? Is it Parliament? Or is it the British people? And if you believe, like us, it should be the British people, then the only way to end this in a democratic way and to achieve closure is to allow there to be a referendum on the terms of the deal at the end.
Because you could argue that there was a lot of people in Richmond Park who didn't like the result of that by-election that the Lib Dems won. Are they going to get another vote on that?
Yeah, it's called democracy. There's a general election in 3 or 4 years' time. So, yes, of course they are. And the idea that you somehow go away and cower under a rock and have to pretend you don't think what you think just because you lost an election is a nonsense, is an affront to anybody who supports democracy. But this is a specific issue. I mean, we are very clear that the referendum that narrowly gave a majority for leave in June absolutely gives Theresa May a mandate to go and negotiate departure from the European Union. What it doesn't do is give her a mandate to make the extreme choice that she has done. She seems to have assumed that the 52% of people who voted leave, many of whom I know, some of whom I'm related to, and who I've got an awful lot of time for, she assumes those 52% of people all agreed with Nigel Farage. That is an insult to the massive majority of those people. It is a theft of democracy.
The problem is, though, there isn't that much evidence to suggest that people are regretting their vote to leave now that we are getting a bit more detail.
So I don't think I'm suggesting that. I think what I'm saying is that when people voted in June, they voted on what was on the ballot paper, leave the EU or remain in the EU, and leave narrowly won. So that's the direction the government should go.
But let's have a look at
this. But there's not a mandate for her extreme position.
Poll. Now, this poll was done after Theresa May laid out her plans for Brexit, so there is more information there about where the direction she wants to go in. 52% of people say that Brexit is the right decision, 38% say that they think it's the wrong decision. I mean, people don't seem to be changing their minds after they get more detail about leaving the single market.
So that's people being asked if 7 months ago, or 7 months on from a vote that they cast, do they still mean the vote they cast? And that seems to be roughly what people are saying. The other poll that we've seen most recently is the one that showed that 90% of the British people want us to stay in the single market. Now, whether you accept that poll or the poll I've just mentioned, the point is we do not know what the deal Theresa May will come back with looks like. We don't know what it will look like. She doesn't know what it will look like. It seems very wrong that the deal that we will have to live with as the United Kingdom for the next half a century, let's say, should be something that is stitched up in the modern version of smoke-filled rooms between Brussels and Whitehall and imposed on the British people. Someone will choose whether that deal is right or wrong. We say it should be the people of Britain. I don't see what's wrong with that.
I just want to pick you up a little bit more, though, on this idea that people don't like Theresa May's plan, that it's the Nigel Farage plan, if you like. Because actually it was made quite clear to people what they were voting for in the referendum. I just want to show you some quotes now that were made during the referendum campaign. Here's Michael Gove: outside the single market but have access to it. George Osborne: would be out of the single market. That's the reality. Britain would be quitting. And here's David Cameron, then Prime Minister: the British public would be voting to leave the EU and leave the single market. I put it to you that people knew what they were voting for. They're not stupid.
Sophie, of course they're not stupid, but how very selective of you. Where was the quote from Nigel Farage over the last 10, 20 years saying Britain should be like Norway or Switzerland? What are Norway and Switzerland?
But we're
outside the EU,
in the campaign,
inside the single market.
Some of the leading figures in the campaign saying that
Daniel
we would be in
Hannan
the
said we should be in the single market. Boris Johnson has been quoted on both sides. In one case saying we should be in the single market. And the point is, it's not an insult to anybody to say that it wasn't clear on the ballot paper. It wasn't. Britain is moving outside the European Union if the trajectory continues as it is. I accept Theresa May has a mandate to negotiate that exit. What she doesn't have is a mandate to rip us out of every single institution. I'd argue this: if
80% of the British people had voted leave, you could make a case for the extreme divisive form of Brexit that Theresa May is pursuing being OK and accepted by the British people. Given it was as close as it was, close to being a dead heat, a good Prime Minister who was seeking to unify the country and to put balm on the nation's wounds would seek a consensual Brexit, leaving the European Union but remaining within the single market. What she has done is to place the gallery of the right of her own party, doing what David Cameron did and putting her own party's interests ahead of Britain's interests. That's why it's right for us to call for unity and for the British people to have the final say on the deal.
I'm keen to talk about Donald Trump as well. It's been dominating the headlines this week, of course, and particularly overnight with this proposed ban on people entering the US from Muslim-majority countries. Do you think it's right that he's offered a state visit to the UK in light of that?
Simple answer is no, of course not.
So
it's right. It should be withdrawn. It should never have been made in the first place. That's not to say that we are wrong to go and talk to Donald Trump. I've often said that in international relations, if you only ever spend time with the people you share values with, you will be very, very lonely and achieve very little. What I am opposed to is Theresa May, when she should have gone over to the States to defend our corner and to stand up for Donald Trump. She's gone over there and held his hand and been seen now to offer him a royal audience here in the United Kingdom. Given what he has just said over the last few days, supporting torture and supporting a ban on people from many countries coming into the United States, including, therefore, many British people with dual citizenship, Farron most famously, but I can think of plenty of other people, including somebody who works for me at my party's headquarters, a dual national. She should be standing up for British people and British interests, not going over there and tickling his tummy.
And so, a quick thought, do you think she was right to go over to the White House at all?
I think having conversations with Donald Trump is important. I think the haste with which she went over there betrayed the desperation that she now finds herself in, because in cutting herself off from any kind of soft Brexit and therefore reducing her options with the rest of Europe, she now looks desperate. And Donald Trump wrote himself in his own book, The Art of the Deal, in '87, that the best time to do a deal is when the other guy is desperate. Donald Trump can smell desperation from 3,000 miles away.
Tim Farron, thanks very much.
I've been getting away with it all